Hello and welcome to Japan Expert Insights and our Wednesday morning room with Tim Sullivan and me, Maya Matsuoka, as your hosts and moderators. In this podcast, we welcome comments, questions, and opinions. So if you haven't done so yet, join us next time on Clubhouse. In the meantime, you can find us at japanexpertinsights.com and our YouTube channel, where we upload all the conversations on Japanese politics, business insights, and Japan's role in the Indo-Pacific region. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We've got Michael Foster. He's a well-known art director, creative designer, writer, and artist. And what is exciting about him being with us today is that he's working on a movie that is coming up in the fall next year. So the movie is called From Chicago to Osaka, and it is going to be a romantic comedy. So that's all I'm going to tell you, of course, because there is a lot that Michael will talk about. So Michael is in charge of the screenwriting and the script there. And it's a fascinating topic. I believe that everybody who loves storytelling, who loves movies, will be very happy to listen to Michael tell us about his working process, and not only today. Michael.
Before we get started, Michael, let me just kind of quickly jump in. Michael came to my attention on LinkedIn when he made these hilarious and super cute mini movies with his dogs, and I'm a dog lover. And it was just so well done. It was so retro, and the other thing is Michael and I are both from Chicago. So there's that connection there. And when I learned about the movie, and I learned it through Doc, who is also here, and Doc, feel free to come up on stage. Especially the Osaka focus, and as someone from Chicago, as we both know, because this is what the movie's about in many ways, you look at Osaka as like second city, Chicago, right? And there's this pride, and there's this, it's got its own unique little culture, and they tend to be more, as you put in your movie, they tend to be more direct. And as an American, that's refreshing. It's sometimes easier, because we're not, Tokyo is much more circumspect. So the theme touched me, and we connected, and I'm so glad we did. And I can't wait for the movie to come out. And I recommend everybody, if you're on LinkedIn, connect with Michael. That's all I have to say.
Well, that's quite an introduction. I don't know how I'm going to live up to that, because I have no idea if I'm well known or not. For starters, people know me. I don't know, but this has been fun. It's been a wonderful process, getting this thing written, and then just learning so much about the film industry. Again, I've worked in it a long time ago when I was a young man, but we'll probably get more into that later. But thank you all for having me. I do want to say your show is called Japan Expert Insights. I don't know how much of an expert I am. I just got to put that disclaimer out there, a little bit of an asterisk, but I'll do my best, because I have a feeling everybody who's is part of the clubhouse probably knows more than I do. It's just my usual Midwestern self-effacing humor, by the way.
Yeah, you know what? We do have a lot of really intelligent people in this room, but you were one of them, and we're here to learn from each other. So I learn from these guys in the audience all the time. So anyway, yeah, I can't wait for you to jump into this, because I'm really excited about the movie. I really am. Nope. So go for it, Michael.
Well, thank you. So where do you want me to start? Like in the process of like how I wrote it, or where the movie's at right now, and we'll kind of Tarantino it back
maybe
to the beginning.
Start with the inspiration and then move from there. How's that?
Okay, let's do it. Oh, by the way, Timothy had something to say. It's showing up on mine. I don't know if it's showing up on yours. If you wanted to have him chime in real quick, how does that work?
I intended to invite him on stage. I hope I didn't hit the wrong button. Timothy, raise your hand.
Yeah, I don't know. This is new. I'm new to the clubhouse, and I'm kind of stalling a little bit of time. I see some more people trickling in. It's so great to see everybody. Okay, well, I can kind of start off with the story here. And then we'll go from there. So basically, as a kid, I grew up in Chicago. I was a little kid in the 80s. I grew up during the Stranger Things time. And I think it was interesting because when you look back on it now, you start to realize that, especially during the 80s, Japan was doing a lot of outreach to America. And especially in terms of like shows, in terms of cultural exchanges, there was an aggressive push towards that. And I think, as being a young, impressionable guy, like I was just drawn to Japanese culture at a very, very early age. We'll skip ahead to 2016. As you all know, the Cubs, the Chicago Cubs, it's a very important thing here in Chicago. They won the World Series, which was a big deal because of the whole Billy Goat curse, which, by the way, we talk about in the movie. The thing with the Billy Goat curse was some guy who ran the Billy Goat Tavern. He brought a goat to the World Series, and he got mad because nobody liked the goat, and he cursed the team. Apparently, that's how this goes. And then the curse was lifted in 2016, but nobody ever talks about the curse of the Cubs have won the World Series, and everything in the planet has been terrible ever since. Nobody. Nobody knows. And it's funny because it's like this is all audio and everyone's got their mics muted. I have no idea if these jokes are going over well at all. but anyway, so it was around 2017, and I was really getting into this particular video game. My brother had given me his own PlayStation 3, and I was gobbling up games and just kind of working out and playing video games. And one in particular just really, really stood out. It's just a wonderful JRPG set in Tokyo. And I kept thinking to myself, oh, this would make a wonderful movie one day. Like, this would be great. And the idea just never went away. It just kind of sat there. And then, obviously the world just kind of kept getting darker and more crazy. And obviously we had COVID comes in, American political nonsense, and just all this crazy. And then it was like around last year where it's finally like, well, I'd love to write this movie about the video game, but they're never going to let me do that. The last time I did anything professionally was, back when I was in college. You're talking the late 90s. And I was doing these like pilot episodes for TV series that Spielberg's company was looking at. Pretty impressive for a 20-year-old kid, but, that was 20 years ago. So I said, well, you know what? I'd love to write maybe something else. And part of it was fueled by the fact that, because of all the discontent, because of everything going on in the world, I just really took a deep dive in the Japanese culture. I mean, I already, I knew about Kurosawa, I knew about Ozu, I studied Japanese art. It always been a part of my life, but I just said, I'm just going to be a PhD. I'm going to give myself a PhD in Japanese culture. And then for the last 3 years, I've been just absorbing everything I can possibly get my hands on. And then, when it was like summer of 2021, my wife and I, we, after COVID, we finally got a chance to take a vacation, and, you have that space to actually think, and the stress kind of starts to burn away a little bit. And I said, you know what? I should write a movie set in Japan. I mean, why not? I mean, I learned so much about this. And also, too, just because, my wife and I were so influenced by the romantic comedies of the early O's. Movies like Lost in Translation, Sideways, which 20 years later, I would imagine the filmmakers would probably make different choices than they did back in the day. So, yeah, it seemed like now was the time to do an update. And so that really became the genesis. It was just like, I wanted to see this movie. And, my wife and I are both artists. We both do paintings, and we're both heavily involved in just all these different things. And we always say that, we always paint the stuff, or we always write the stuff that nobody else has done. So, well, we got to do it because we want to see it. And so the idea of a romantic comedy set in Japan just seemed to be the way to go. Just something I wanted to take on.
Well, we got Timothy on stage. Timothy, did you have anything you wanted to put out there for us to chew on?
Well, finally.
Hey,
Once
Timothy.
I get into the elevator and I'm going upstairs, you finally acknowledge me, but gosh.
I am sorry. I am new to the clubhouse. Can I write this off as a rookie mistake?
No, I really did try to sign on earlier because I was so happy that Maya got you on the schedule. And everybody knows you. Everybody should know you. And what epical and so fascinating. And that's one of the great things about this room and about Maya finding these people under rocks like she found me, and giving us a venue and a voice to talk about the things that drive us and keep us, in this country. And man, when I saw you on the schedule, I thought I've got to be, listening in this room. And so that's why I jumped in. But thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming on board. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks. I'll try to keep it lively and entertaining. It's the one thing Chicagoans do well. We may not be the smartest guys in the room, but we definitely keep things entertaining. That's our mantra.
Well, you're in great company.
We try not to take things too seriously.
True. That's what happens when you have baseball teams that are notorious for losing. You can't. You'll go into cardiac arrest.
Yes,
That's part of the
humor
deal.
is born out of pain and tragedy.
Right. Exactly. So anyway, so that's the movie. So I could talk about the movie itself. We can talk about where we're at in production right now. What would you guys like to know about?
Wow. Go ahead, Mai.
Oh no, I was just going to ask you to tell us a little bit about the movie, because I believe that some people here, or most of them, will be happy to hear about it. I also posted the link to the website in the chat, the room chat. So if anybody wants to go there and have a look, please do. But I'm sure that Michael's telling us about it will be much, much more entertaining.
I'll do my best. You guys keep raising the bar.
Yes.
So basically, okay. So the story's about a young man in Chicago who gets involved in a mass shooting, and we'll talk about why that happened, why I wrote that in a second. But he's basically he's suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, and him, like me, it's not really autobiographical. Although Dylan, the main character, and I share some of the same philosophies and same history. He wants to move to Japan. He's like, I got to get to Japan. Like my country's gone insane, even though Chicago is like the last bastion of sanity. It's time for me to go. And so he gets invited to an art show in Osaka. Now, the reason why I wrote about, obviously, Chicago and Osaka are sister cities. And when I started doing my research, it was like, there's so many similarities between Chicago and Osaka. And then in the part of the movie it's about exploring the similarities. We'll turn Tino back into that in a second. So anyway, so Dylan goes. He meets up with his old college buddy from Northwestern, a guy named Kaneda. Kaneda is now a salaryman with 2 kids, a wife, and he wants to go back to America because it's just not as stodgy, and he has a little bit more freedom, and he wants his family to have the same experiences he had when he lived in Chicago. And of course, during all this, Dylan meets the assistant director of the art show, which he is showing at, which we find out was kind of finagled behind the scenes by some friends, a girl named Haru. Haru is engaged to a boy named Ryuji, and Ryuji, he's not the best fiance. So long story short, you have all these characters, a lot of them working at cross purposes, trying to figure out where they want to go next with their life. And it's done actually very lively. I'm a big fan of like Aaron Sorkin, and he was always heavily influenced by the same movies I was. I loved movies like His Girl Friday or Bringing Up Baby. A lot of those, like what they called fast talking high trousers films from the 30s and 40s, where everyone's just like talking over each other. And I thought it'd be really, really fun to have a romantic comedy where everyone is just all talking at each other, and then they'll all be talking Japanese. So it's actually done in 2 languages, which I thought, that would be fun. I haven't seen that before. To have that ping pong style dialogue and then having it kind of switch back and forth from Japanese to English. But the catalyst of the story, the fact that Dylan was involved in a mass shooting and that causes him trauma, partially because I wanted to be able to address some things that have bothered me over the last few years with American society, but also too simply you just need. I wanted a real catalyst. I needed the character to be like, I got to get the hell out of here. And I mean, sadly, that is the most obvious situation in which a person would be kind of dealing with trauma. And so, and I also think too, I think with every great movie, you can have movies that are kind of a little bit light on their feet, but I think all great comedies, something serious, if there's something that's very sort of profound and serious, that's like the foundation of it, then it helps just elevate the movie. Adrift in Tokyo, which came out in 2007, has that, where obviously, without giving too much away, there's something very serious and heavy that's sort of underlining the actions of the characters, but it's more of a drifty sort of roly-poly kind of film. And that really, that's what the movie's about. I guess I could have given you like the baseline, but it seemed like it would be more fun to kind of give you the full picture there.
Yes, and I wanted to ask you, how do you start writing a screenplay? I mean, like a whole movie, where do you start from?
That's a good question. I mean, a lot of it For this particular film, it started with me looking at romantic comedies that my wife and I enjoyed when we were first married and saying, well, I want to write that. And I looked at a lot of those films and what they do right, what they do wrong. And we'll use Lost in Translation because that's coming up on its 20th anniversary, sort of a good template for this. Because one, we haven't had a lot of romantic comedies for adults, much less set in Japan. And this film, however you feel about it, has greatly impacted the culture. And I just, and watching it years later, it's like, well, this is a good movie. But I feel like there needs to be the newer version of this. And that's kind of like where it started. Also, too, why a screenplay was because it just, I've always loved film. I've watched so many movies, both Japanese and American in my time. And it seemed like this story would be best suited for a film. I think it's one nice thing when you're working in all these different art forms is that you can decide, well, if it's just kind of a feeling and emotion that's indescribable, well, that's good for a painting. If it's something that's very personal but non-fictional, well, you write an article for Huffington Post or Psychology Today. If it's something that it's a story, and I'm not the best novelist, nor with my 8 jobs I have time to really write a full novel, a screenplay seems to be the best fit for that. So really it was just, I just literally just sat there and for like a month in my head just started bouncing around ideas and the kind of movie I wanted to see, but really was driven by the fact that looking at Lost in Translation, when you look at those 2 characters, they show up in Japan and they are, it's a very unfamiliar country. And it's a product of its time. This movie came out 20 years ago. It's hard to judge films 20, 30, 40 years on by today's standards. And the idea was, of course, is that Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson, they're lost in their own lives, and the situation that they're in, the country that they're in, sort of exemplifies that. And I think in the end there wasn't any ill intention. I know obviously some of those scenes don't play as well, and I don't think they'd make those same choices now as they did in the past. But I kind of got the idea that Bill Murray could have been in Toledo, Ohio, and still would have been unhappy and miserable as he was in the film. But when I approached this film, because it's 20 years later, and our countries have grown so much more closer, and I just said, well, I want to explore the similarities. And that to me is a lot. That's more interesting. That's the way to go than our differences. Because the more I studied Osaka and Chicago, and I'd studied Japan for years, but I really did a deep dive in the city of Osaka. The more you just realize, wow, Chicago and Osaka, there's just so much in common, including cursed baseball teams. So once you had that, it's just like anything else. I have these characters in my head. I just figured, well, what would it be like if me and like my dad, like who kind of becomes the Skip character, and goes to Japan and kind of has these kind of crazy adventures. And then from there, the dialogue and everything, it almost like you get to a point where it like writes itself. And that's basically it. I think in the end, like it goes back to the fact that you just want to write a movie that no one's making, so you want to see it. And if no one's going to make that movie, well, then you better make it.
Yeah, Michael, one thing I noticed when, reading, going to your website and looking at it is one thing that you mentioned up front, and I love, is that you flipped the stereotypes. And I love that because all of us in the audience who have lived in Japan for a long time, I think we all know intuitively that you're walking a fine line, a tightrope by, on the one hand, saying, okay, here's Japanese culture, here's all their tendencies. But at the same time, saying, but they're all individuals and not every Japanese person checks the same boxes. And there's many people that defy that stereotype. And sometimes, for example, Japanese women, I think there's a stereotype in the West that they're these weak, helpless wallflowers, when in reality, Japanese women are strong, right? And so you have these misconceptions, but I like the way you flip the script. And in a sense, the characters you created are, maybe I've got this wrong, but the feel is the characters you created drove the story in many ways. Does that make sense?
Oh, right. No, I mean, I think partially I was influenced by when Stieg Larsson wrote The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and then the subsequent books. He did the trilogy. When people asked him, I said, "What was his secret sauce? Like, what did he come up with?" He said, "Well, I basically made the girl character the guy character, and the guy character the girl character. What we typically associate with male-female traits. In the end, it's Elizabeth Salander who has to rescue Mikkel Blomkvist because he kind of naively goes into the villain's lair." So anytime he was confused, he just made sure he flipped the script. And yeah, it just seemed like, well, that seems like that would be kind of a fun thing to write. I mean, I know, and it's always a fun topic to talk about, but obviously we talk about, American politics and gun violence in this country, which definitely is a lot of fun. But I know in Japan, they're still working on equality, gender equality in the country. And when I looked at, when I went to approach writing it, it seemed like, well, let's just flip this. Let's make like the male characters more like the protagonists in a Haruki Murakami novel, where they're just kind of wandering around and stuff's happening to them, and the female characters to be kind of the ones driving the action, especially Haru. And so I was worried about that because, like anything, if you're trying to project your own vision on a culture or an idea, you always, especially in this political climate, you always have to be very concerned. Well, is this going to be appropriating? Is this going to be incorrect? Is this going to be problematic in some way? And so the first answer I always say to that is, well, just do your research. You just learn, read anything you can consume. That's to make sure that you're getting it right. That's the first most important thing. And the second was, I was talking to a gentleman who is the vice president of a very large film company in Japan. We kind of go back and forth every now and then. He's been very, very supportive. And in the beginning, when I was asking him, I want to write the script, but I'm really concerned that I might be projecting my own sort of ideas or my own contemplations a little too much. And he said, "No, listen, he goes, in Japan, we want your ideas. Like, we're okay with it. Like, don't worry about holding back. Like, you tell us what you're seeing." And I said, "Well, that's awesome for Japan, but I'm always worried about America and what America is going to think." Because we're very touchy right now about a lot of different things. So, but in the end, the best answer to that is, well, just do your due diligence, do your homework. And I will admit, like when I sent the script, and then Doc Kane, who's producing the movie, he contacted me, said he wanted to read it. Him just saying, "Yeah, you nailed it." I mean, my gosh, that felt so good. I mean, I really, that moved me, because you never quite know for sure. And here's somebody who kind of lived the life of Dylan a little bit. He went to Japan. He's married to a Japanese woman. And it's like, if anybody would know, if I got it right, it would be him. And so that was very affirming and wonderful. So yeah, I think in the end, that's the best thing to do. Do your homework.
Well, that's fascinating. And I particularly like 2 points you made. The first one, that you decided to find the similarities between, the Americans and the Japanese. I believe that's what, you were talking about. And that's the first one. And then second, that you actually you care about how your projections or your own thoughts are shown to the audiences, because we often are too quick, to say something without thinking about how it will be, let's say, accepted or viewed by the people around us. And it's really something that is very rare now. And I appreciate you doing that and saying so. And also that it's very, very good to make the point that, the Japanese people actually want your views, and that they're open to them, because I believe that from a cultural point of view, there is a misconception that Japan and the Japanese society is a kind of closed, elitist, but it is not really. And people are very open, and they are ready to accept ideas from those who come and are ready to share their ideas with the people here.
Right. And I think in the couple of things you always have to keep in mind is, one is that you do the best you can, because you're in the time period you're in right now. And you just don't know 20 years from now what people are going to be happy about or what they're going to frown. or they're going to frown upon. I always feel that in 20 years, people will probably, especially the way the 2020s are looking, it's looking like a pretty rough, dark decade. Maybe the ultra-violent films that have gone on over the last few years. That, and by the way, I mean, I love John Wick just as much as the next boy, but I wonder if like they will look upon those films, the ultra-violent movies, as distasteful. You never quite know how the vision, what's going to happen in the future, and how people are going to look back upon your work. So you can't worry too much about that. You just make do the best guess as you can. But also too, I think the big thing is be respectful. I think especially when I was writing the Haru character, I didn't want to write another just manic pixie dream girl or just a projection of Orientalism or anything that was that could be considered stereotypical. It was very important that all the characters are real people. They make mistakes. They're not 100% on their game. They're just doing the best they can with the situation that's presented to them at the time. And I think that also too just makes for a more interesting character, and you like the movie better when you can relate to them. There's no superhumans in this movie. No superheroes.
That's great to know. I think that we are kind of tired, of watching movies about superheroes and action heroes and whatever you call them. So, yeah, the human nature, I think that we need more movies about people the way they are.
Right. I mean, I would imagine that the trends for superhero movies are fading, and I'm a big advocate that I think that properties, IPs that are based on manga or anime will be the dominant driving force of entertainment in the next 10, 15 years. I don't see why that wouldn't be the case. There's just such wonderful stories coming from Japan that I feel that those adaptations are just waiting. And that'll be, and it's like I said, it's going to be a rough couple decades. Geopolitically, everything's looking pretty dark right now, but something good always comes out of something bad. And if Japan becomes the second cultural capital of the world, which it already is pretty much well on its way, then that's a good thing. And then if I can help in a little small part, that would be a life well lived.
Yeah, indeed. Oh, Tim, go ahead.
No, I think that what you have going for you is a desire to strike an authentic note where when people watch this, they'll say, oh, yeah, that's really very close to how things, really are in Japan. And I say that not lightly because many big blockbuster Hollywood movies have gotten things wrong. And, either the mannerisms or the accent or whatever, but they get the details wrong. And it's funny when I watched years ago, I think it was Die Hard, right? Was it Nakatomi Enterprise or something?
Oh, yeah, Nakatomi Plaza. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was this scene, and a lot of foreigners would miss it unless you're really tuned into the culture. But there's a scene where all these Japanese women are dressed up in kimonos. Now, first of all, unless it's, some kind of performance, it's unlikely you would see that in the U.S. and in L.A. But one of the ladies who was dressed in a kimono had it opposite the way she had it, the way she was wearing. She was wearing it the way a dead person would wear it. Okay,
right.
And my wife just picked that right out of the rest of the scene, and to her, like that one detail, was just disappointing to her, right?
Right.
So, and in some ways, some of those characters were portrayed in a very stereotypical, cartoonish way. And the fact that you're like really digging deep and want to be authentic, I think gives you a leg up even on these so-called blockbusters. And the added benefit is now you got a bunch of friends, the people in this room who really can be resources maybe in the future if you ever need it.
Well, to be fair, Die Hard was 30 some odd years ago, and I think that anything made in the 80s always sort of carried over that trope of anti-Japanese sentiment. Everyone was still upset about Pearl Harbor, even though it had been 40 years. So I kind of take it with a grain of salt. And also, too, by the way, personally, I mean, I like Die Hard. I mean, come on, I was born in 76. I mean, anybody my age is going to like Die Hard. It just appeals to all of our little buttons. But I always said that movie was sort of like the pinnacle of male masculinity. And then after 10,000 years of male masculinity, it created Die Hard, and then that's it. It's done. We're going another direction now. because when you have a barefoot caveman guy with like a wife beater T-shirt, like shooting a plethora of terrorists that seem to represent everything that white America is afraid of, you kind of like, okay, yeah, that's it, we're done. Time for something new. I could go on about that, but that's a whole other topic. That borderlines on stand-up comedy.
Right. Yes. And we're definitely heading in a new direction, I think. So DC Potter, I hope that we're not going to see as many stupid superhero movies from now on. So let's see what happens. And Michael, there is a question to you in the room chat. I'll read it out for you.
Sure.
It is from Mayuko Yoshida. Hi, Michael. What is your favorite Japanese film or director?
Ouch. Oh, that's tough. Oh my God, that's tough. Okay, hold on. I mean, first of all, historically, obviously, you Kurosawa for many Americans. That's your gateway. That's how you see Seven Samurai, you see Rashomon. Those are, of course, the first ones that get introduced to you. Right now, if I had to say my favorite director, the man, he's done a few movies. Shoplifters, Koreeda. I love everything he's done. If you guys know who Hirokazu Koreeda is, he's done Shoplifters.
That was
he
a
did.
great movie.
Yeah, my favorite one of his actually is Our Little Sister, which I think was called Umachi Diary. Am I getting it right? I'm sorry. My humblest of apologies. I'm blanking out real quick because, believe it or not, when I do these talks, I actually get a little nervous. So I'm actually having a Hibiki Suntory whiskey right now while I'm talking to you. You don't get that on the audio. You only see that in the video. But Like Father, Like Son, Still Walking is a great film. After the Storm. I mean, there's just he's just such a wonderful director and sets such a great mood. And I love because him and the cinematographer, they talk about how they all always shoot in 35 millimeter because 35 millimeter film that's the color of memory. And he wants his films to feel like they're of memories. And that's just such a wonderful notion. But like I said, growing up as a kid, I mean, obviously, Lady Snowblood, that was, who was that? That was Toshiya Fujitas. Yeah, that's his movie. I mean, because I remember, everyone talked about how great Kill Bill was, but I always felt like I'm missing something, and I realized, yeah, I wanted to be watching Lady Snowblood instead. That's what I was missing. But also too, the gentleman who just won for Drive My Car, and I just want to make sure because I know his name, but I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it correctly because I want to be respectful. Ryusuke Hamaguchi. Yusuke Hamaguchi, his work, I mean, is wonderful. He had done, I mean, obviously everybody has seen. If you haven't seen Drive My Car, please go see Drive My Car. But he did another film last year too, which I think is available on the Criterion Collection if you are here in America, and it's called The Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy. That's a wonderful film as well, and I actually don't know which ones I like better. Which one? If I like Drive My Car better or Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy, even though I'm a big Haruki Murakami fan. And then in terms of anime, the gentleman who did it's Weathering with You, but Your Name was the one that I really really loved, and that's Makoto Shinkai. His animation work is wonderful. I remember he did a film a while ago called 5 centimeters per second, which set such a wonderful mood. So that was a very long answer to that, but oh yeah, thank you. Okay, there you go. Umimachi Diary. Yes, thank you. That's the one that I was trying to remember. Here in America, it's called Our Little Sister.
Oh, thank you. Now I have a list of movies I can watch now.
Well, if you ever want a list, just let me know. There's so many. Especially over the last few years, I was doing a deep dive in the Criterion Collection and all their movies from Japan. And oh my gosh, there are so many. If you're in America, I don't know if do you get Criterion Channel in Japan? Do you guys get that?
Not that I know of.
Oh man, because they have such a wonderful selection of Japanese cinema that I don't even know where to begin. Besides like the usuals, I mean, they have Suzuki's Tokyo Drifter, and I actually like a lot of the films he did. Story of a Prostitute. There's gosh, I mean, yeah, I don't even know where to begin. Nomura's Zero Focus from 1961. God, yeah, there's so many movies. I mean, I actually, my wife and I are gonna watch House actually at some point before Halloween because she hasn't seen it yet, and that's just such a classic from 1977.
Interesting. This is going to age me, but one
Okay.
of my favorite directors is the late Itami Juzo, and a lot of social commentary, Japanese style humor. I just always found his movies both thought provoking but hilarious. And one of my favorites is Tampopo because it's about food. So, did you have any thoughts on Itami Juzo? And if not, I highly recommend you watch some of his movies.
Here's the thing. I'm sure I've seen him. I'm not recalling him right off the bat, so I don't want to speak out of turn. But I will look him up and I'll be like, oh yeah, I saw those too. But yeah, I don't have anything on the spot. My apologies. Oh, I forgot. Hamaguchi's film Soko 1 and 2 is also wonderful as well. And another movie I can recommend is To the Ends of the Earth by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. And that's actually an interesting one if you haven't seen To the Ends of the Earth, because that actually is in one of the breakaway Soviet republics. I think is it Uzbekistan? It takes place in. Hold on. I looked it up. Uzbekistan. And obviously, right now that those areas are worrisome. But it came out in 2019, and it's about like a former J-pop idol who travels with a small crew to Uzbekistan, and she's kind of doing like a travel show, and it's a very delightful film.
Yeah, thank you for all the recommendations. I'm sure that quite a few people, including me in the first place, of course, we have now a list of movies to watch. And
I have bored everybody to death talking about these movies, is what I think.
I don't think so. I'm just sorry that I couldn't get Deborah the Snow to come today because she's busy filming. But maybe at some point in the future we'll get you both here because she's a documentary movie maker. And,
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, she creates also some. She has created some documentaries about Japan and the Japanese history and culture, also modern culture as well. So yeah, we have a couple of people who I hope can join us up on stage here. So please, Gabor, or if you feel like Mayoko, you too, please join us if you can speak now, and everybody else who is actually here. Dean,
Moving up the questions. Okay.
Yes. Oh, but it's okay. Our room
Well,
is not strictly structured, so.
Oh, no worries. Well, while everyone's contemplating, I can kind of tell you where the status of the movie is right now, just so we all kind of know. So basically, as of right now, as of, what is it, October 25th in America, October 26th in Japan, this is it. Right now we're looking at this to be and by the way, Doc Kane, he's listening. He has just done such a wonderful job of getting things moving so quickly. I'm blown away, and I'm not just saying that, and it's not just the whiskey talking because I've had a couple already. No, this is he's done just such a wonderful job. And so we kind of went over. I said, well, what can I talk about when I talk about this film? And so basically, what we want everyone to know is that this is going to be a co-production with a Japanese production company, and the person who's running it right now, a line producer. He's been in the film industry for a few decades. He studied at NYC, and Doc met him on the set of Independence of Japan, which was filmed in Kobe, actually. And so right now, the script is in the hands of a director from Japan. We're not naming names yet, just because we'll get to that at some point. And that we're looking to do because of the bilingual nature of the script, we're looking for a bilingual cast and crew. This is going to be a true sort of English, Japanese, American, Japanese production. And right now we're working with the Kansai area film offices and hoping to be talking with investors and distributors soon. That's really the next big step. Things are moving very, very quickly, and we've had so much interest, especially because I know Osaka is celebrating. They're having the big. I know I think there's an anniversary next year for Chicago and Osaka being sister cities for 50 years. And And I know the World Expo comes to Osaka in 2025. So our hope is to be shooting next fall for a autumn 2024, summer or autumn 2024 release, and that's the status of the movie right now. As like any movie, it's always about the F word, financing, funding, whichever one you want to use, and so that's always the big key. But like I said, things are moving very, very quickly. So we're pretty certain that all this is going to happen.
Yeah, I was going to ask about financing because, but that's kind of the boring side of it. We're having more fun just talking about the art side of it, right? The movie. So
Well, it's also terrifying because it's like, please give me money, lots of it.
Yeah.
I swear it'll be good. I mean, I don't know. I always look at it like, I'm glad I'm not handling all of that. I'm leaving it to better, more talented people. But like anything, I mean, it's interesting because the industry, I know like a lot of films are like using NFTs to try to make, to try to finance films and doing all these sort of crazy methods. I will say this about the industry, though, is that when we're talking about the superhero films and everything, as times become more turbulent, people tend to go for more dramatic and more realistic entertainment. We saw it after 9/11. I always say that these sort of crazy, sort of extravagant films. We went from James Bond having an invisible car and a villain with diamonds in his face to Jason Bourne, a much more gritty take on the spy movie. And you saw that obviously the James Bond movies followed suit not too long after that. I imagine that over the next few years we're going to see a transition again to more dark, gritty, realistic films, and so. And for me personally, I kind of like those a little bit better. So I'm excited to see what comes out of it. But in terms of financing, I tell you, a lot of films, a lot of studios, when COVID came around, they spent a lot of money. I don't know if you heard, but that one James Bond film, they were spending I think it was like $2-3 million a month just sitting on the film. Films are expensive when you can't release them in theaters, and especially with the streaming wars, especially with so much going on and people just trying to pump out entertainment as much as possible. I imagine we're going to see a shift from expensive films to smaller budget films that are much more creative and interesting. But I did a whole talk about that too, and why I thought Japan was so well positioned to be the front runner for great movies in the next 20 years.
I hope you're right. Another thing about you mentioned casting, and obviously I'm sure you have no idea yet who you're going to cast, but in terms of the process, are you going to be involved in that, or will that be completely up to others?
Well, you know what? Doc has been so cool about that because he's like, well, who do you think? And I've been very transparent about who I'd like. I'm not the type of person, though, who just assumes that the bowl of spaghetti in my head has all the answers to everything. I don't know. But I have made my recommendations, and I have, it's interesting when I wrote the film because I'm such a visual person and know movies so well. Yeah, I had people in mind who I wanted when I wrote the movie, and also just even the look, the feel, the cinematography. Like I kind of knew exactly, almost like shot for shot, like what this thing was going to look like. But that being said, you hand it off, and I give them all. I'm just very, I give them all the information I have, and then they'll run with it. But I think what's interesting is that because it's a small independent production, all of us have so far have had a real wonderful. We've had a say in everything. So we're not. I mean, honestly, we're not there yet. But once we have a director, we'll be there very soon. I'll tell you one thing though. What's interesting between the difference between Japanese filmmaking and American filmmaking is that Japanese filmmaking, you want to have the producers in tow. You want to have them ready to go. You want to have the director. And then you'll start to look at casting. Whereas a lot of American films, it's like, who's attached? Like, if you can get just a name of a person, they're like, you don't even have to have a script. Like, okay, you're ready to go. And then you'll figure out what the movie's supposed to be as long as you have a star attached to it. It's two different ways to do films. And not every film in Japan and America is done like that. But we're kind of approaching the beginning phases of this in a more Japanese way. We're getting the producers, and then we're getting the director, and then we'll start figuring out casting from there. And that's it.
Great. Maya, got anything, or do we have any other questions?
We've got Yuka today again. Yuka, hello, and thank you.
Oh, good morning, Yuka. I didn't even see you. Thanks for coming.
No, I just came up. Thank you. Yeah, actually, I am trying to find a quiet place that I can talk with my husband making all kind of noises. So I'm trying
You
to,
know, it's amazing that usually my place is the one with all kinds of noise because we had a pizza
you know,
delivered during this
here,
conversation and my dog's going to go crazy. I'm amazed. That's my wife, though. She's
there's a
handling that.
function called voice isolation, but somehow that I cannot get that to work. But anyway, so apologies for noises if you guys can, hear them. But anyway, hi, Michael. It's very interesting talk. You really talk like someone from Chicago, by the way.
Oh, a lot. That's what
That's a
that is.
compliment. That's a compliment.
Well, thank you.
Let me ask you this though. So, maybe movie, like a project, maybe one of the very hard one to, the like a forecast the success. Right? Because sometimes you never know that, what tickles the consumer's funny bones. So which part are you focusing on? Like you said, I'm trying to figure out when you said Chicago and Osaka are, very similar. And then, okay, because I'm more familiar with Tokyo culture. So, Chicago, is that like there are more comedians in Chicago? Because, Osaka, I think, is known for their humor.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we have a thing called Second City. Do you ever heard of Second City?
No.
Oh,
A lot of the
You mean
guys.
subculture? I don't.
Oh yeah, no. Second City is is where a lot of the Saturday Night Live comedians. A lot of they always joke that basically New York takes our best comedians, and so yeah, we have a very rich comedy culture here. And so yeah, that's part of it. Also too, I think it wasn't just the fact that the cities were similar. The cities were similar. It was the fact that like the relation between like let's say Tokyo and Osaka, from what I read and from what I understood and from people I talked to, seemed very similar to the relation between New York and Chicago.
It's kind of rivalry, like
Yes, very
okay.
much so. Yeah, and the New York guys kind of look at Chicagoans like a bunch of loud, boisterous knuckleheads, and and the Chicagoans look at the New Yorkers like, oh, you're kind of pretentious. You think you're so great. There's a sort of like fun rivalry. I like,
Okay.
yeah, Chicago's a big foodie city too. And Chicago, obviously, we have blues, we have music, we're kind of like rich in culture. But I always say it's like our culture is like the pizza here. It's very thick, it's very saucy, it's very just in your face. And so yeah, and when I started to think about it, like why I wanted to set it in Osaka was because they make so many movies in Tokyo. And don't get me wrong, I mean Tokyo seems unbelievably wonderful. I can't wait to visit. Hopefully Jay and I are going to get there. My wife and I, Jamie and I, are going to get out there next year. But it seemed like they don't make a lot of movies in Osaka, at least American movies in Osaka. And I felt like, well, crap, there's this whole wonderful city that just hasn't had its due. So that was part of it. Was like, well, why wouldn't anybody want to see Osaka? I mean, there's plenty of other Japanese cities too I'd love to write about. I promised Doc I'd do something with Kobe next. But even then, I think there's just. I also think too, and part of it is a strategic move. As our televisions become more, the resolution becomes better and better. I think it's going to be less about special effects and more about like on location shooting. People, probably aren't going to be able to travel as readily as they have in the last 30 years. There's going to be a lot of fighting and a lot of wars and a lot of issues. So if you can, and by the way, the film business has always thrived on taking you to a place you've never been. But I think especially with the high resolutions of televisions and films, if you can really show people a city that's interesting and fascinating that people would love to go to, I think that's going to be a real value add for films. So is that?
Great. Yeah. Okay. Now,
Yeah.
thank you so much for explaining to me. That now I, think of it like maybe Chicago and Osaka. They may be like maybe it's similar, but it's different from New York and Tokyo. So I have a question on the main theme of your movie. So
Right.
it seems like the room title is like a romance comedy. It's like
Right.
okay, I'm trying to figure out. So maybe I'm not too familiar with that genre. Is that like you are gonna make audience laugh, like a haha laugh, or maybe let them think about and chew on something you want them to think about?
Hopefully both. If that if that makes sense. No, because there's definitely a lot of haha moments. And I will say this, trying to write something that would be funny in both English and Japanese that was a real challenge. And it was a fun challenge. I really enjoyed it. I'll give you an example. I'll give you a little insight. So there's a scene in the movie where Haru first meets Dylan. I'll only give you a little bit. And she kind of embarrasses herself in front of Dylan. And there's situations in which that lead up to that. There's a reason why she sort of acts very carelessly. And then, so basically, once she realizes she's completely humiliated Dylan in front of everybody and not realizing it, she turns to him and then she's kind of slowly, kind of like, oh boy, here we go. And then, he introduces himself, Hajime mashite, yoroshiku onegaishimasu, which of course, they always say there's no literal translation to yoroshiku onegaishimasu in English. But what the closest they come with is please treat me favorably. So as a film goer, I'm thinking, how great would it be? Like, okay, so she's humiliated, she's crawling, and then he's handing him a business card, and there's the subtitle, please treat me favorably. As he's handing her the business card, and of course, as soon as she gets the business card, she realizes this is the artist she's humiliated. That scene, I think, plays well in both cultures. And so that was really the fun of it, was to have these sort of laugh out loud, these very funny moments, to have the banter, the way the characters talk back and forth to each other, to get those big laughs. But there's also this sort of underlining, sorrow to the story. Dylan is going, he's drinking a little bit too much. He's borderline alcoholic because he doesn't know how to deal with his trauma. Both Kaneda and Haru in the film feel a little oppressed by the demands that the Japanese society kind of forces, the collectivism kind of like puts upon them. And so it seemed like it would be a wonderful way to write a very nice romantic comedy that gives you a few laughs, but also kind of addresses some of the things that people are thinking about. And I don't know if there's any like solidified answers to this. That wasn't necessarily what I was aiming for. But I think in the end, if people laugh and then makes them think about their life and takes them to a place that they've always wanted to go, then it's a job well done.
No, it's great. Thank you. Because, it's so happened. Like last week in this room, we talked about, there are Japanese young folks, seems like they're not too happy these days. And
Right.
then I'm just, it saddened me to hear that. So anything to sort of lift their mood anyway. And then I think I'm all go for, I'm all for it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
We're getting close to 9 o'clock. That's the time when we usually wrap up.
Okay.
The room and wish everybody.
Does anyone have any other questions or?
Yes. So if anybody has any other questions, please share them in the room chat or come up briefly here and tell us. If not, I'm sure that there will be questions after the room, after we close the room. So I believe that we'll need to have a sequel of this conversation soon, so that we can also continue talking about from Chicago to Osaka. And
you should have Doc and I both on there. That's what, because hopefully we'll be well into making the movie. That'll be important.
Yes, let's do that, definitely. And okay, Tim, thank you for the approval. Well, with this, once again, Michael, thank you so very much for coming here today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Next time, we can probably do a live stream as well, simultaneously with Clubhouse, because it's not impossible. It's actually quite possible, and we have been doing it on Sunday morning. So let's think about it and plan it and do it. In the meantime, I wish you a great reminder of the week. And also, we hope that
thank you.
The season. Yes?
Well, you know what? I'm going to go ahead for everybody who's like watching or listening, I should say. I'm going to put like my website up on the chat. Feel free, if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm obviously I like to talk. That's not a problem. But please feel free if you have any questions, you want to follow up, just reach out. And obviously from Chicago to Osaka.com, that is the website that our film and updates will be posted. So feel free to hit that as well and sign up for our mailing list.
Thank you so much, Michael. I really enjoyed it today. I'm looking forward to the movie even more now.
Okay, well, it might be a couple of years, so we'll just hang in there. We still got to get some money and get some cast, and then we'll make the movie. We'll let you know every step of the way how things are going.
Yeah, please come back.
I'll try to hang on that long because I'm old, so I will do my best.
Right. Yes. You'll be around, Tim. Don't worry about that. I'm sure.
You better be. We gotta meet. At least hang around till next year when I come out. My wife and I will come out there.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yes. Okay, so once again, thank you very much, everybody, and we're looking forward to seeing you again. Have a
Thank
great
you.
day or good night. Thank you for tuning in today. We will be on air next week on Wednesday at 8 a.m. Japan time again, so join us. Until then, you can find us at japanexpertinsights.com and our YouTube channel. If you want to stay informed about our upcoming events, follow us on Clubhouse, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Again, we are looking forward to your joining us next week. Until then, stay well and make the best of the day. See you!